charity which aims to develop Africa's future female STEM leaders. We are great and honored to have these three giants in our midst today. So help me welcome Doctors Tagoe, Asabere, and Madam Ghansah. You are welcome, please.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you so much.
So let me start with Dr. Tagoe. When we talk of science, we know that mostly the attention is on men. We are expecting to see men take the lead. But this is the case where we have three women in our midst. So we would like to know, what sparked your interest in science as a young person?
The honest answer is just the default Ghanaian education system, because as most of you may appreciate, once you start school and you, I suppose, are good in a lot of subjects, you just tend to be expected or encouraged to take up the sciences. And so I wouldn't really pinpoint a time or an incident that got me super excited about science, but I think I was just expected to do science. I didn't really explore anything else but science. And I tried it out and I was good at it and I enjoyed it. So I stuck with it. That's my story.
Wow, that's great. Interesting. I think Madam Ghansah would also like to know what sparked your interest in science.
Okay, thank you very much. I think our line with Doc, there's this African expectation, isn't there, from family and parents, perhaps always trying to dictate what the pathway should be for the children. So my initial stages were mostly influenced by family to go into pure science, and you know, I would want her daughter or son to be a medical doctor. So that's how I started. But I realized very quickly that my interest or passion was more into math than the raw biology bits and chemistry. So I started as a pure science student, but then I eventually diverted slowly into pure math, and which I've continued till now. Yeah.
Interesting. Great. Dr. Frimpong, can you share with us what sparked your interest as well?
Well, I can't understand where my fellow panelists are coming from, but for me, I love documentaries as a kid, and I like mixing stuff. I thought of mixing paracetamol and iodine, if you remember, the one they used to put on your wound when you got hurt. So I smashed that para and iodine, thinking, okay, if you are hurt, to take care of the pain and then take care of your wound at the same time. So I like experimenting with stuff and being good in class. Obviously, I wanted to be a doctor, but not influenced by my parents, just by my sheer curiosity of how the body works. And I realized that no, I don't like biology, I like chemistry more. As you can see, I was mixing stuff already as a kid. So that's where my interest came from, and I'm happy I was able to pursue it. Though I initially wanted to be a doctor, but I realized, no, the biology was, I love biology, but I didn't want to be a doctor. Yes.
Thank you very much. This is inspiring. So now we know if our kids start to miss stuff at home, we don't have to ask them to stop. Great. Yes. Thank you for sharing this. So it's motivating to know that you all have interest in science one way or the other. But I would like to know, you are role models to people, but I want to know, do you have role models yourself? People you look up to? Madam Ghansah, will you take this?
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. I find out that those that I look up to keep changing as I continue to navigate through my career pathway. So initial stages would be my teachers. I happen to have quite a number of female math teachers. One in particular that I remember would come and pick me from my class to take me to Form 5 students to teach them math when it used to be O-level, A-level. And so I had that kind of inspiration and motivation from them. And then as I continued my career pathway, I then had mentors along the line, head teachers that had shaped me along the line as well. So it's always varied, depending on where I was and what I was really aiming for. Family has been a very big support as well. And even peers, people that, because when you're reading math or even science, you find out it's male dominated, it's quite masculine, and you really need those perhaps few female peers, you know, within the lot to kind of gel together and be each other's cheerleaders, so to speak. So it's been very varied for me.
Thank you. Let's move over to Dr. Tagoe.
Yeah, role models wise, there's only one STEM role model that I've really connected with, and that's Lisa Quest. I do have other role models, not necessarily STEM, directly STEM related. In fact, the first role model that I had before officially getting a mentor was Beyonce, which is, yeah, for various, not for music, but for her work ethic. She was the very first person I remember as a young girl really looking up to from her time in Destiny's Child, just because of her work ethic and that strong female personality that she exhibited. But directly STEM related wise, I'd probably say it's been Lisa Quest for me.
Thank you. And Dr. Frimpong, Amy?
Yes, I've had a couple. I really agree with Ms. Ghansah about your role models changing as you grow up. And for me, I think my first role model was my mom, because she was absolutely brilliant, but she didn't get to go to school like finish even like basic school. But she was so good at maths. You know, we got to the back and she can calculate, and you will make a mistake and she'll be right. So she was that kind of brilliant woman who also loved education. So she'll push you to go and learn, and she had a passion for learning. But as I grew up, I realized that there were so many people cheering me up, but in science, there were mostly males. You know, my chemistry teacher from SHS, my thesis supervisor from first degree was Dr. Agyekum. But currently, my role model is Professor Anna Scaife from the University of Manchester. She's currently my mentor. And I think she's a great inspiration for me because of her work ethic and what she has been able to accomplish so far in her career. I'm so bad. Sorry. You can't hear me. Can you hear me?
That's okay. That's okay. Yes, we can. Thank you so much for sharing your role models with us.
Yeah.
It's a lesson to us. We are learning that you can't be an island on your own. You need someone to look up to. This is inspiring. Great. Now moving to STEM. Tell us, what are your thoughts about STEM education in Ghana? And more generally, especially for girls? Dr. Tagoe. Kindly mute your microphones if you are not speaking, please. Thank you.
I think I heard my name. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah, bearing in mind, I have been out of country for quite a while. And so the contribution specifically for girls in STEM is coming from the work we do through GHScientific. I do think over time, things have shifted slightly. And even from my time going through school, perhaps because I did go to an all-girls school, I don't remember a time of going through a phase where it was the case that I suppose focus is being given more to boys than girls when it did come to STEM. However, over time, and I do know that when you do have like a mix of boys and girls together in an environment, the dynamics tend to change with the girls, which is why there's, I suppose, the need for places like African Science Academy, where you have all-female environments so they can really empower themselves and come out in their own. But in terms of the state of girls' STEM education in country at the moment, from what I know, I don't think there's active segregation where we can accept the girls, or we'll put the boys in the science class and not so much the girls. At the same time, there must be something fundamentally not quite right if we look at the typical science and math quiz, because we do know that it's been dominated by the boys' schools for a very long time. Although we've seen some amazing performance from a young girl recently, I think it was Qatar Secondary School she was with. So I can't really say much about what happens in the classrooms because I haven't been in that space for quite a long time. I feel the work that we do at GHScientific, especially with our Agyekum, we've gone through putting the boys and girls together, and we've gone through specifically running the comms just for the girls, just because we do know that dynamics change when you have the girls alone and when you mix them up with the boys. And perhaps that is how best to empower our girls so they don't feel that they need to take a back seat when there's a mix of boys and girls in that STEM environment. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Tagoe. When you were speaking, I realized Madame Ghansah was nodding. As a head teacher, she has experience with what happens in the classroom. So, Madame Ghansah, can you share with us?
Thank you. I was nodding because rightly so. I think things have begun shifting quite positively in Ghana, I must say. There's more of an awareness in terms of more girls getting training in STEM and so on and so forth. However, I think what really needs to be shifting is moving from the aspects of theory into practical hands-on activities, because we do have very, very gifted and talented girls coming over to us, and they know so much about the theory in physics and perhaps had only touched the practical element like twice within their 3 years in high school. So yes, there is a good kind of shift happening now, but perhaps we need to rethink in terms of how do we incorporate the practical elements into the teaching and learning, perhaps right from primary school through JHS. So before they get to senior high, they would have been exposed to basic elements of robotics, you know, all the things that we are now talking about, perhaps not focusing it only at the senior high level, but bringing it all the way down. I was reading an article a couple of days ago, and it was quite refreshing to know that there's been about 1,500 girls trained from the primary school. I think there was a partnership collaboration work between Ghana and Korea or so. So these are the things that we want to see more of, and perhaps more of an emphasis on the practical aspects of the teaching and learning. Yeah, it's just a bit too theory heavy at the moment for the girls and for the students in general. And also there isn't a clear kind of segregation, which is correct. However, I think cultural perception sometimes tend to almost unconsciously segregate the girls from the boys, and in wanting to even partake or to take these elements of science to the next level. Because I remember my time in uni, we have about 46, 47 males and perhaps 6 females. And you know the kind of intimidation, even if you answer something rightly, and you just have to have a really thick skin to find your way through and all that. But things are really shifting, and we're hoping that we'll begin to see the impact of all that is happening within the education system here.
Thank you very much, Madam Ghansah. Dr. Frimpong, what's your take on this?
Well, for me, I think your next shift towards making STEM available for girls was when I was young and the advert came out, send your girl child to school. I remember it very vividly. I was very young. It was a very catchy tune, and it was always like, send your girl child to school, and it was very, very vivid. And I think we have progressed, maybe not to our satisfaction, but we have progressed really, really well since then. From the National Science and Maths Quiz, where the host is a female, I think that really impacted me when I was young, and they've kept that tradition. Currently, in my capacity as head of outreach and science communication at the Ghana Radio Astronomy Observatory, we get children from all ages coming from their schools to visit us. And you can see the young ladies are really brilliant and eager to learn more about science, and especially from the GHS level. And even the universities, we've got universities coming in from their engineering, telecommunication, electrical. And you can see almost equal participation of girls to boys in the class, which I think is really recommendable, but we still have a lot to go. One thing I recommend Ghana for is equal pay for female system. I think that's a huge problem in the West, where women and men are not paid equally, even though they are doing the same job. But in Ghana, I realized that for us, we are paid according to your qualifications. And I think that's really recommendable and something we should keep doing. And also, I think one thing I'll add is that the females should show themselves more. The female system don't show themselves enough, to my satisfaction.
Okay. Yes, I think we
Yes.
lost. Okay, great. You're back.
Yes, I'm back. Yes, so I'm saying that one thing I think we're not doing enough of is the female system and not showing ourselves enough. Because as I said, I remember all my mentors in GHS and university were men. And during my PhD, I didn't give up because I have 2 daughters. And I was like, I need to be a role model for them to show what could be for them in science. So if we can show ourselves more to the girls, to the schools, to the teachers, to their parents, it will be a huge step in the right direction in including girls in STEM in Ghana.
Thank you very much, Dr. Frimpong. Now to Dr. Tagoe, I would like to know, how do you think we can include parents and the wider community in STEM education?
Right, okay, so the outreach projects, because we do know in the mostly Black, not necessarily African countries, the Black community, especially with the work that we do in the UK, parents have a huge influence on the choices that their children make. And so when we don't just invite the children, I've got unstable. Can you hear me okay? Connection clear?
Yes, please.
Am I cutting out?
Yes.
Yeah, so we actively invite parents when we're dealing with the Black community. We invite parents to come along to the careers workshops, especially just so the information that the children are getting, the parents are getting the same information, which makes conversation easier when it comes to supporting the children, so that we can move away from the traditional perception of science or STEM just being go down the medicinal healthcare route to creating wider exposure around other career options that the talented children who have strengths in other STEM areas can be encouraged or at least explore those areas as well. So I would say, yeah, involving parents is really important just because of the influence that at least African parents or parents from the Black community tend to have on the choices that the children are making. And that's how we tend to approach through our careers events.
Thank you, Dr. Tagoe. Now to Madam Ghansah, I would like to know, to what extent do you think science communication is important, and how do we promote it?
Thank you. So science communication, in my understanding, is how we tend to relay to perhaps the layman. And I think these need to start right from our schools, and how we are teaching these topics and these subjects in the classroom. Because even as at now, I could take a physics textbook and there are elements of content I'm thinking, what are we up to? Where's the breakdown of the language to be able to be accessible to all, even to the Form 1 students, all the way to Form 3 students, and just thinking about a bit widely to the public as well. Even in recent times, let me just go to COVID, and when COVID started and we all were thinking about vaccinations and everything, and even the very literate in society were so confused because of perhaps how the whole information was being disseminated, and how simple it was for people to understand. So I think science communication, it's very, very crucial, especially as we continue to think about things like global warming and what we need to do to protect our environment. Basic things for people to really understand the effect of bushfires, to the woman in the village trying to process her charcoal, perhaps that's her business. And how do we simplify the information to everybody to understand on the kind of journey that we want to go on? So that's my take when I think about science communication.
Thank you for sharing this. Now, Dr. Frimpong, Madam Ghansah shared a lot in terms of communication, but I would like to know, in terms of increasing resources to make learning at the basic level practical and boost interest, what are some of the ways we can go about this?
I know that we currently struggling with resources for teachers, for educators. But one thing we should know is that we have so much at our fingertips in our environment. We should try and develop our practicals that use our everyday things at home and in our environment. That's one way we can cross the hurdle of lack of resources. Because without that, and if we keep following the literature from the West that lists things that we can even find in our environment, we always lack resources to help our students understand what they are learning. I remember we've had a teacher training in astronomy for basic schools about late last year. And we picked things like thread, paper plates, even rocks to demonstrate sun, solar eclipses, day and night, things that children can go home and replicate. And these are ways that we can cross the hurdle of lack of resources. Also, we need to give refresher courses to the teachers, because they come in with the knowledge they've learned from their training, but it tends to fade out or not kept up to date. And so those of us who are still active in research, in science communication, should reach out to teachers with simple follow-up materials or simple courses that they can participate to refresh their knowledge and to keep abreast with what is changing currently in science. I think that's one way we can cross the hurdle of lack of resources.
Thank you very much, Dr. Frimpong. I think the issue of resources is so important to us, and I would like your take, both Madam Ghansah and Dr. Tagoe, on this, to know if we can explore more. So, Dr. Tagoe, do you have any to share with us on the resources?
I think there are a few local organizations who are doing quite a good job in trying to just put together local resources for local practical activities that are easily accessible. Practical Education Network comes to mind, and DEX also comes to mind in terms of the kits that they've put together and the work that Penn does with teachers as well, trying to simplify science or make the resources being used for the practical science ones that are easily resourced or accessible both to the children at home and for teachers to be able to access quite easily for classroom use as well. But 100% I do agree with what Dr. Frimpong did say, that we need to tailor the resources that we have when we try to, we don't have as many African written or applicable STEM books, and so we have the ones from the Wesley to go by. But there's no reason why we can't apply the expertise of our local scientists to then adapt to the resources using local resource materials to then bring the same concept to life. And the two main people that I can think about, as I've just shared, would be Penn and Dex, who are doing quite a good job in that sector. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Tagoe. Madam Ghansah, more resources.
I think I would echo back on the continuous professional development for teachers, because if I just reflect back to teaching in the UK, you would have your textbook. However, when you take it, you now use the piece of information that is relevant to your lesson, and then you almost reinvent your own activities to more like differentiating for your learners. And I think these skills do come in when teachers are offered training on how to do that. Because simple things for AFL, we used to do red, amber, and green cards, and there are no textbooks, but it's just things that you get to pick from training. And I think there's a need for us here in Ghana to perhaps invest a bit more into CPDs for our teachers to bring them up to speed with what we really need them to be doing in the classrooms with our learners. And on that, I know there's a body of work happening in math, but I don't know that much for science CPDs. For example, we from the African Gifted Foundation do run a yearly teacher training for math teachers across the country. And we tend to realize how much of a need there is out there for staff wanting to be led on to simple hands-on activities, things that they can use, as Dr. Frimpong and Dr. Tagoe rightly stated, things that we can use which our students are familiar with here for them. Yeah.
Thank you all. I think we've had enough on the resources. And touching on the teachers, I would like to know, how do we improve quality teachers, knowing that the knowledge that is being transferred to the learners is the best one for STEM? Dr. Frimpong, will you take this for us?
For the teachers, one thing I'll say, which I've already said, is on learning and even specialized training in particular subjects. Because I think there's one aspect they should really train them on, is how to prepare their lesson notes to make them digestible for their age group, the age group they are training. Because knowledge is universal, but it depends on how you break it down for a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, and somebody who is in high school or the university. So how to even break it down to make it understandable for every level of stage a child is very important. And also specialized training, like as Ghansah said, you can't do training for maths and only maths, and even if you have a particular topic in maths, the teacher can actually learn extensively on and be very good at. Like we did one for astronomy. Astronomy is just one aspect of physics, which is one aspect of science in basic school. It's not even a whole science course, it's just one tiny aspect. I realized that the teachers were lacking some basic knowledge in how to even teach solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, which were also affecting the children. So if we can do specialized trainings for them, that's one way we can improve the quality of the teachers.
Thank you very much, Dr. Frimpong. Yes, specialized training for our teachers who work. As a head teacher yourself, Madam Ghansah, I have to come to you. Share your views on this with us.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. Just putting my head teacher hat on, I'll say perhaps we need to think about the quality assurance processes that we have embedded in our schools. you know, what's happening at department level. At what point do we have peer-to-peer kind of lesson planning? Is there planning time together for departments? How are resources being produced and shared? How is leadership confident about the quality of teaching and learning happening in the school? So I would always focus that back on, do we have clear quality assurance processes in the school? Are there performance management review moments? You know, is there a system of growth? Because when I came back to Ghana, I realized, sadly, a culture of fear amongst teachers. And I thought, sorry, this needs to go. Because we are peers, we need that fear factor coming in, because quality assurance shouldn't be a fearful process. It should be a process of growth. So I think for us to enhance the quality of teaching and the teachers that we have within our schools, we might need to rethink, how do we use, number one, are these processes embedded in our schools? Number two, how are we using them? Is it punitive? Is it supportive? You know, to kind of, because otherwise you will not be able to get the full potential out of the person you are trying to support. And also, I find peer-to-peer kind of observations and planning together quite helpful and quite relaxing for teachers to do as well. And from a head teacher's point of view, how many of our schools are engaging in some of these things, which perhaps could be done like 30 minutes a week or something, and the impact would be quite phenomenal. And so that's the other bit. And also finally, sharing of good practice within schools, because if I think about UK, we would visit schools and perhaps one maths department and the other would collaborate and we'll visit a couple of lessons in their schools for a day or so, and we'll come back to school with lots of ideas. I don't know how many of these do happen even with schools within communities, and these are more like almost to zero cost things that we could do as teachers to enhance our own professional development, the quality of work that we're doing.
Thank you very much, Madam Ghansah. And talking about teachers seeing it as a punitive measure, it reminds me of when Ghanaian teachers were asked to go through the licensure exams. They felt it was a punitive measure and they didn't buy into that. But when they realized the need that it will improve their own academic status, they are now accepting it. Thank you all for sharing this. Now to Dr. Tagoe, I'd like to know, what are your own ambitions for your contribution to science?
Oh gosh, contribution to science in Ghana or globally? Ambition is going to be global, right? Are we talking science? Are we talking worldwide?
Yes, so we want to know worldwide, then you break it down to Ghana.
Right, the whole, it comes down to, well, I like to consider myself a generation that's simply to be moving on, although, you know, we're still all very young, but a lot of it and what we do at GHScientific comes out to capacity building. I think it ties in a bit with what EduSpots tend to do as well. So it's empowering communities. So we're talking about teachers and classrooms and how we're teaching, but really the generation that we are teaching, how are we, I'm not sure empowering is the right word to use, but how are we equipping them in terms of critical thinking, design thinking, in terms of looking beyond today and being abreast with perhaps what the future 10 to 20 years time is going to be, so you can envisage ahead what some of our, you know, like more developed countries tend to do and invest in, so that the generation that we're raising now are going to be our future STEM leaders for tomorrow. I think really ambition-wise, that is what I would love to see in country when it comes to the approach and teaching of STEM in general. And yes, it's great to start from the basic fundamentals with all the everyday resources that we can use to simplify complex science concept, but then we know a lot of these things that we're reading in books. There were amazing scientists who discovered what we're reading today, and science has not fully been discovered at all. There's still a whole world of things yet unknown, and it comes down to how we're building capacity with today's generation, perhaps the generations to come after them, so they can think beyond what we see on the surface and envision not so much a future like the Jetsons, but the future where the world is going STEM-wise, and how the country can be part of those developments. And perhaps if we move it away from the young people of tomorrow, it would really be great if we can get to a place where nationally the government can prioritize STEM as well, so that we can really support our young ones who are having that interest and wanting to develop in the sector as well. It'll be great if we can get to that place. Specialist STEM centers where our young people can just go and explore and collaborate and just do amazing futuristic STEM stuff. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tagoe. Now, I would like to take this from the three of you. I want to know what you wish you knew at the start of your STEM career journey. So, Dr. Frimpong, please take this for us.
Okay, what I wish I knew was it's okay to ask for help. You shouldn't apologize for asking for help, because no one is an island on themselves, and you should apologize, and you should, I don't know, because we always feel guilty when there's this syndrome called imposter syndrome, where especially if you have traveled outside of your country, just less than, you feel like you shouldn't be here. But you are allowed, you are to be there, you should be there, and you must strive. Because in the UK, in the department I was, at that time I was the only African, the only Black person, and the only woman Black person. So like it was isolation upon isolation upon isolation. And you could feel there was no bad feelings coming from people, but from yourself. You will feel, am I supposed to be here? But you are allowed. You should be there. And it's okay to ask for help if you're struggling, because everyone needs help. You are also allowed to ask for help. It's important.
Thank you, Dr. Frimpong. I want to find out, being the only Black female in UK, as you said, how did you navigate?
It was a struggle, because every time I went for a conference and we took a picture, I was the only Black person standing in there. You can imagine, like every conference for about 2 years. And so I made us all like one color. I didn't say white, I didn't say Black, we were people. And so I treated them like people I knew from Ghana, and they should ask them to treat me as such. And I called everyone by name and greeted everyone like I want them to greet me. And in the end, it created an environment where I was comfortable, and they were also comfortable with me. And so that's how I navigated it. I made them all my friends by the end of my course. I guess I helped a lot. Yes.
Yes, that's interesting to know. Thank you. Madam Ghansah, what you wish you knew at the start of your STEM career?
Yeah, so for me, the first thing was it was okay to speak up and speak out, because sometimes I felt that our African training perhaps misinterpreted speaking out with arrogance. And when I got out there, started my career, I realized that it didn't pay to be timid, and you quickly had to know what to do. so that was one thing. And I learned that really quickly because I moved from teacher of math to deputy head of math in a very short space of time. And you really needed to wrestle with many things, and you need to make sure your voice was heard. And another thing I learned was it was okay to feel like you don't fit in sometimes. It's okay to feel out of your depth sometimes, and rightly so, to shout out for help. And asking for help wasn't a sign of weakness at all, especially in a male-dominated field. You may be tempted to almost be quiet. So I learned that as well. I learned to ride a wave, because it's always not going to be calm, and just learned to ride the waves, because perhaps the roles that I found myself in also helped me to learn quite quickly, because I moved from deputy head of math, and then straight into senior leadership. And you just didn't have time to process things, and you just had to go. So speaking up, speaking out, being okay with being out of your depth and shouting out for help were the things that I learned now, rather than before.
Thank you so much. We are learning a lot. Before I move to Dr. Tagoe, if our audience here, there are any questions for our three giants, kindly put it up in the chat box. We will respond to it at the end of the session. Dr. Tagoe, your take on this. What you wish you knew.
Yeah, I'm taking a slightly different approach to this, because when I hear what I wish I knew, this generally what I did wish I knew, that I was more system than what I had access to, or this was what I was exposed to. Because what then has happened, I've navigated a lot of career sectors. I've done biotech and pharmaceuticals and research, and gone into science journalism, and now science communication, and I'm running the business. And it was all because of the way the education system was. I had to do science, and I do love the science, but then I did have other skills as well that perhaps complement my science. And if I did know about the wider opportunities that a career or a course or a degree in whatever STEM sector could bring, I would have made different choices earlier on at the start of my career, rather than the shoeboxing individuals to be like, you must do science and then it's pharmacy, or it's physiotherapy, or standard traditional ones that we were exposed to at the time. And so for me, that is what it would be. And it would be great if, fast forward, there could potentially come a time where students can go to, if they are going to go to university and not have to pick biological science, but then they can do like statistics as a module, and then go pick like Agyekum as another module. So you were coming out a lot more holistic within the wider STEM sector, and not just doing, let's say, math without any knowledge of bioinformatics, or doing, you can even choose an English degree and merge that on with like a STEM modules. And I think hopefully it would be great if we can move towards that kind of the future of education, or they do this and do this and do that in one shoebox. And so, yeah, that is what I wish I knew, that I can just do like a biomedical science degree, but I don't have to just go work in the lab, and the same in other science sectors I could have accessed with those qualifications.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tagoe, Dr. Frimpong, Madam Ghansah. I think we've learned a lot. We've learned that we have to ask for help, speak up and speak out, learn to ride the waves. And when it comes to our courses, as Dr. Tagoe said, she wished we had holistic subjects or courses to help us through our careers. Now, as women in STEM, we know that obviously there are going to be some issues you face. We want you to share with us some barriers, any barriers or prejudices that you have faced as a woman in science. Madam Ghansah.
Thank you. I think there's been many. I think the first thing is people doubting your capability. Because I remember even going for interviews, and feeling as if, you know, I was the most qualified and so on and so forth, and coming out and the male being chosen over the female and so on and so forth. And so I think one of the barriers had been people doubting perhaps your capability and to be able to perhaps take on the pressures of the job and the area in which you are pursuing. I think I've mentioned already about sometimes feeling out of your depth and asking for help, and people misinterpreting that as if, oh, she doesn't know what she's about, and, you know, rather than seeing that as a sign of strength, somebody being very open and transparent about what they need help with. I've had lots of, I mean, sometimes I hate to talk about the racial barriers, so, but yeah, quite interesting. I remember there was a time where I had to take over a particular role from a male colleague, and he was supposed to train me. And it's very subtle when somebody is condescending, and you just have to be very professional, and some of these things are the barriers. And he tried very hard not to train me, and I needed to remain composed but not giving up. And so I had to go back and find ways and means to navigate my way through around him, and later on got trained outside of my school for the same thing, came back to do. So the barriers go on and on and on, but the good news is that I say to the girls all the time, know who you are, know what you want, and maintain the focus. It's quite key, maintain the focus and being very composed about it. Because the other thing I realized quite quickly is when you find yourself not so lucky amongst very positive males, I'm saying males because we're talking about experiences and barriers, aren't we? And you'd quickly find people perhaps processing your genuine concerns as perhaps emotional. Oh, there we go. And, you know, and how do you still remain composed and still get your message across? So for me, I have navigated quite a lot of barriers. Sadly, some of them have come from female head teachers that I'd worked with as well. But I would always say maintain a very positive and growth mindset, and just know what you want and just go for it regardless of what stands in your way, really.
Interesting. Thank you, Madam Ghansah. Dr. Tagoe, any barriers?
Other barriers, yes, a lot. I've experienced many too, but my biggest challenges as a woman in science came during my PhD days. So just to put things in context, so usually you're doing a PhD after a master's, right? And even if you're going back to back from degree, MSc to PhD, you're probably starting off around maybe 23, 24, it can vary. But in my case, I've been in employment before I went back. So we're talking, well, at this time I had a 1-year-old, and in my first year of my PhD, I got pregnant with my second daughter as well. It was the most horrible time of the year in my entire career that I can remember, just because of the, well, at the time, things are changing now, lack of support and sensitivity around the challenges that can come around being in the lab. First, you're dealing with chemicals. I was doing actual lab wet research, so you're dealing with chemicals. You don't want to risk losing your funding position because there's a time frame in which you're expected to deliver certain things, and so there's all the pressure on you. And I was 8 months pregnant before I went to my supervisor, who was horrified that I'd been in the lab all the time. But at least that period of being kicked out, the program was gone. You know, so there's been a lot of challenge, and then there's all the expectations of conferences and presentations and traveling. So I know my first travel post-delivery, I think my daughter must have been 3 months when I had to travel to an international conference, still breastfeeding. Hotels didn't have pumping facilities. And it's just a very uncomfortable, horrible experience. Manage little kids. Even childcare was an issue because you didn't get funded for childcare. You can't just take your child into work with you, and where are you supposed to put this child if you have to go back into their lab, you know? And no one really thinks about those things when it comes to, well, maybe not research. It might be the same case in other careers, but I do know things are changing gradually. But personally, for me, my first, and it's part of the reasons why I'm not actually doing active research anymore, because it was such a horrible experience, which is a shame, because I'm sure we're losing a lot of other amazing research scientists because the environment is not very feasible for our lifestyle, for those of us who choose to have a family as well. So that's one. The other thing is, even outside my personal experience, the perception, we have a lot of male professors, right? That's the fact, is traditionally how science has been. And unfortunately, some of them are still stuck in old mindset mentality, and people actually do say, be careful about hiring female staff because they fall in love with their research and supervisors, and you're better off hiring like a male postdoc or male research assistant. And you're thinking, like, really, we don't come to work thinking, I'm going to see who there's a nice, researcher in the lab that I can fall in love with. But people do actually, and this is something that I did actually hear someone say at a conference as well, the female researchers fall in love with their supervisors and crazy things like that. And it just really, puts a lot of barriers in opportunities that a lot of us can really access and excel at. But you get to the point where really you don't care, because you have to not care so you can progress. Otherwise, you are losing focus, and you've got this subconscious mindset, and you end up holding yourself back because you're worried about, your male supervisors thinking, are you falling in love with me? Crazy things like that. But there are various facts. But what I do say to a lot of ladies, you can't go into workplace thinking about the barriers that potentially could be in your way. You just need to find ways to navigate around it and not make it a thing. Otherwise, you end up holding yourself back. But yeah, barriers are there. Facts.
Great. I can imagine it has not been easy.
Terrible.
Okay. Right. Such a shame. Before we move on to Dr. Frimpong, please get your questions ready. When she's done, we are going to ask your questions. Don't let this opportunity pass you by, because these are three great giants we have in STEM. Dr. Frimpong, can you share with us, have you experienced any barriers, or you have been fortunate?
For me, one of the barriers I think I acutely remember is the difference in our education system and the West, because as Tagoe said, we have a very theoretical, straitjacket education with no merging of maybe computing and physics, and here I was expected to know Python without even having heard of it. And the expectation of what you should know and what you didn't know was a huge blow to me. And I think I go by what Ms. Ghansah said, that you just have to persevere and not apologize for not knowing what you don't know, but rather take the step to learn, because it was more of a where you were coming from problem. It wasn't racial, but I think because of how we are learning, you don't do an inclusive learning where things are added in to help you make it into a wider or interconnected science. You just learn physics and that's that, or you just learn chemistry and that's that. But they learn with coding or robotics or something, and so they have a very wide field of knowledge, which we lack when we do get there. And so I had to really persevere and learn Python and coding and from the scratch for a PhD. So it was really, really hard. And also, I realized that some people never want to help you, even when you ask for help, because they have their own perceived knowledge. But what I want to say is that out of one, there are 10 others who want to help you with no bias. And so you should persist in learning and seeking help when you need to, because that will be instrumental in your success. That's what I'll say.
Thank you so much, Dr. Frimpong, for sharing this as well. So back to our audience. It's been a great evening. We've had a lot of insight from I call them our three giants here today because we are fortunate and they have great experience shared with us. Any questions for us? You can either unmute and ask the question, or you can type it in the chat box. Fad, have you received any questions so far?
Haven't received any questions so far.
Okay.
Monitoring the
So
chat.
if you have any question for them, okay,
That's fine.
great. Kindly unmute and ask. Okay, so maybe I'll randomly pick on people to ask questions. Let's see, Edward. Can you hear me, Edward?
Hi, Elizabeth. So I think I'll need to ask a question certainly.
Okay, we have a question here. Yes. Okay, before you come in, Fad, someone's hand is up, but I see iPad 3, so please go ahead.
That's all right.
Unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, it's me. I just forgot to change my name. So I'm Saiba.
Yeah, okay.
A past student from African Science Academy. So yeah, it's good to see that our new headmistress is on the call. So my question goes to Dr. Naomi. I heard her talking about women in science don't really show themselves to the public and that is something that is limiting like the next generation encouragement in pursuing science. So I just wanted to know, it's a problem, right? So I just wanted to know why is it that? Why does she think that, or why is she thinking about that? And maybe possibly what kind of solution do we have for such kind of problem?
Thank you very much, Saiba. Dr. Frimpong, over to you.
Okay, thank you. So one thing is that Ghana has a very poor culture of science communication. We don't communicate enough our scientific research. And if communicated, the men are saints. If you consider the radio stations, the TV stations, you see the men who come with talking about what the company has done, what the institute has done. So I think one, maybe because we don't have enough women to fill those positions, but those who are there should step up to the game of volunteering themselves. Sometimes it's difficult to go and talk to the public, and I've had that struggle, and I've had to take courses in science communication. And putting yourself, just do it. I say, if you do it, you get used to it. So take some Coursera course or something, talk to somebody who does it, learn how to communicate your science, and put your foot forward to be the one sent to the radio station, to the TV station, to the schools to talk about what you do. And you'll be given a girl an vision of what she could be in the future. So that's what I was saying.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Frimpong. Fad,
Right.
ask your question. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And then huge thank you to our wonderful guests. I've really enjoyed this session. My question is directed specifically to Dr. Hephzi Tagoe. I know she runs some other charities as well as having, children. My question is, how is she able to blend all this with family life? Being the founder of the GHScientific, having other social enterprises, sitting on two children, how is she able to blend all this?
Yeah, I think it's important conversation as well. Thanks for that question. And mainly for the young ladies, and some of the men, it's really important the kind of man that you end up with, because they're either going to make your career or break your career. And so I've been, I suppose, lucky enough that I can leave my kids in Ghana now, actually, without my children. Lovely vacation. Because we keep them at home with their dad, right? Even from when they were very little, and I had to focus on my research career. And it's just really finding a way to balance the family dynamics. When they were younger, we did have them in full-time childcare because we were both working. And sometimes it can be challenging because everyone's running late, everyone's working late. And you adjust as you go along. At the moment, I work for myself, so I'm home a lot more and I can work around my own time. But we've gone through the different phases of, being at home and not being at home. I've gone through the whole guilt of, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible mom. But you learn to get over all of that. And especially, as I said, if you, for those who end up, who do want to get married and have families, if you do, it's really important the kind of person you end up with, and they need to be able to understand and accept and appreciate that we both have our own paths that we're on, and we can still be together and have our family and be on our own path still. And yeah, that helps make it easier.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tagoe, Dr. Frimpong. I think we are 7 minutes behind time, but I would like Madam Ghansah to share her last words with us before we wrap up.
Thank you very much. My last words really will be to all our young ladies pursuing different pathways within the broad umbrella of STEM, is to not to give up, to ensure that they have a clear focus, know that the terrain won't be always smooth, and they need to learn to ride the wave, as I've said before. They need to be emotionally composed in readiness for tough moments and tough conversations. They need to pause every now and then to celebrate their achievements and to reflect on what they need to do to even make things better for themselves. And I wish them all the best in all that they continue to grow into, and also for us who are perhaps in the middle of our journey to continue until we kind of level up the playing field, so to speak, having seen girls where we really want them to be in the world of STEM. Thank you.
Hello, Fad, can you hear me? I think I dropped
You're
off.
loud and clear.
Okay, right, great. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Yes, Dr. Ghansah, we got Madam Ghansah, we got you there. At this point, we'd like to say a very huge, enormous thank you to Dr. Tagoe, Madam Ghansah, Dr. Frimpong. It's been so inspiring because we've learned that we should know who we are, we should maintain our focus and persevere. So even if you didn't take anything from the session, there are 3 things we are going to take along with us. It's been an honor being with you. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you all for sharing your experience with us. Without much ado, I'd like to bring the session to an end. Do have a wonderful evening. We are so grateful. Thank you all.